Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Empowered Psychology podcast. My name is Cristela, and I am the host and the founder of Empowered Psychology. Empowered Psychology is an educational platform and community that gives a voice to those with visible and invisible illnesses with the hopes of empowering them to use their minds in order to create their dream lives and overcome adversity. So today is the second episode of the Empowered Psychology podcast and also the second part of my lupus survivor story. So let's get right into it. So if you haven't watched the first part of my lupus survivor story, you need to go ahead and do that because I'm just going to piggyback off of where I left off in that episode. So I leave Honduras. I was hospitalized on February 1st and I was in really bad condition, and they actually had to give me a blood transfusion and a few other medications in order to stabilize me so I would be able to go on the flight back to Houston. So I thought I was just going to go to Houston and I was going to get treatment and then I was going to be okay, but that is not what ended up happening. So I officially left Honduras on February 3rd of 2016, and they gave me a whole bunch of medicine to go on the flight, and so I don't remember much. So I remember landing in Houston, and my parents were with me, so my grandma and my brother came to pick me up at the hospital, and still nothing is clicking, but I do remember that they were really happy to see me, and I know that they were in a lot of pain because they clearly knew something was wrong, something was very wrong, but I still wasn't putting the pieces together. But I know that looking back now, they did look very worried. So we leave the airport, and the doctors in Honduras told my parents to take me to MD Anderson, but my parents ended up deciding to take me to Texas Children's, which was God himself making that decision, because I credit Texas Children's for saving my life. So we get to Texas Children's, and my dad's best friend Renato meets us there, and Renato is an amazing man, and he's always happy. But I remember when I saw him, he looked very worried. I have never seen him look like the way he did that night ever again. And yeah, everyone was very worried. They got me out of the car and put me into the wheelchair, and we went inside the ER. I'm checking into the ER, and I remember it was a woman and two men checking me in, and they see me and they just look really worried. I got a lot of looks throughout this hospitalization in general. I got a lot of looks because I looked very sick. And so I remember they're just looking at me, and they asked me, okay, well, what's going on? And I said, well, I just flew in from Honduras right now, and these are my symptoms. This is what's happened. This is the treatment they're giving me. And by the time I gave them the whole summary of what I had been through and why I was there, they were just like, okay, well, we're going to admit you immediately. And look, Texas Children's emergency room is very packed. I feel like all the time. So the fact that they admitted me immediately just says a lot about the condition I was in. And at that point, they hadn't even taken any exams yet. They just had to look at me, and I just had to describe what I had been going through, and boom, they admitted me. So I'm admitted into the ER, and I had an amazing nurse. I still remember her to this day. She's just asking me the questions, what happened, what are your symptoms, and etc. And her too, as she's typing and looking at me, she is just shocked. She is just, she's mind blown, honestly. So she's like, okay, I'm gonna go get the doctor. So the doctor comes in, and he is a very charismatic and handsome man. Have to add that point. But yeah. So he comes in, he's making us laugh, and he's introducing himself, and then my mom starts to tell him what's happening. So just to add, these were my symptoms so far. I had extreme fatigue, dizziness, a rash in my face, chest, and armpits, ulcers and cuts in my mouth, ulcers in my nose, red eyes, migraine headaches, hair loss, an unintentional weight loss of a total of 18 pounds, congestion, pale skin, and severe depression. And also, she added on that they had diagnosed me with anemia and Zika virus, and that my hemoglobin before coming to the United States was at 5. So, like I said, he was a very, very charismatic man. And I remember after my mom told him what was going on, I mean, his charisma just shattered immediately, and he got really, really serious. And he said, okay, you know that we are possibly dealing with a malignancy, right? And a malignancy is the state or presence of a malignant tumor, which is cancer. So he pauses and he says, I'm going to get her admitted, and we need to start the process as soon as possible. And this is where I snap back into reality and I start crying. In this moment, I'm just seeing a bunch of flashbacks of my entire life. I feel like I got a full picture. I'm remembering my first memory of me dancing on a beach when I was 3. I'm remembering my first day of kindergarten. I'm remembering myself hanging out with my friends and being happy and just being a quote unquote normal kid. And now I have cancer, or they're saying I have cancer. I was just distraught. And this is where I snap back into reality. Okay, I'm no longer in that 4-year-old mindset. And I'm honestly terrified at this point and wondering how did this even happen? How do I have cancer? Like I said in my previous video, I would always see the commercials of the St. Jude's hospital. And I would always feel sad for the kids in those commercials, but it never even crossed my mind, not even once, that would one day be me. And I was distraught, confused, and honestly just really, really scared. And I'm just getting really, really scared at this point. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm possibly going to die. So I start praying to God, and eventually I calm down. And the doctor tells me, okay, well, we're going to go to the 8th floor now, which is the oncology floor. So at this point, I knew that I needed to be strong in order to face whatever it was that I was going to have to go through, because I had accepted the fact that I was very sick and this is very serious and it's out of my control at this point. So they hooked me up to an IV. And look, I was that one kid who had to be held down by 3 nurses in order to get 1 shot. And now, looking back, it's just kind of funny because the next 6 months of my life would consist of getting regular IVs. So that was my new normal. And they took me to the 8th floor, which is the oncology floor at Texas Children's. aka the cancer floor. And I remember being wheeled to my room and seeing how the other kids had decorated their rooms. You see their doors, and it was like Connor's fight of whatever cancer he had, and all these notes and gifts that people would give them. And I was just thinking, wow, like, wow. I mean, honestly, it was just mind blowing to me. It was so much to process at once. And so, again, I just had to accept my fate and be strong and wait. So, I ended up calming down and falling asleep. And the next day, the doctors came in, and it was a group of oncologists, which are the doctors who treat cancer. And I remember they walked in really happy, and I was over it at that point. And I was like, look, nice to meet you. I'm Cristela, but I need you to be honest with me. Do I have cancer? Do you think I have cancer? And they were like, yes, we do. And then they went on to talk about what my life was going to look like for the next few months. And I just kind of zoned out. And like I said, I kept having flashbacks of my life and asking why and how did this even happen. And so they told me that I needed to get ready to have a surgery because they needed to take a biopsy of one of my swollen lymph nodes. So I think I waited about 2 days to do the surgery because my body I had just gone through a lot. So 2 days later, I have the biopsy, and again, I have to wait for the results. So the results came back about, I would say, a day to 2 days later. I don't remember, guys. I was going through a lot, so I didn't even know what day it was. But it came back negative. And everyone was shocked and confused and also relieved. And yeah, we were like, okay, well, what the heck is going on? So they didn't know. I clearly didn't know. Nobody knew. So then they were like, okay, well, we're just going to release you from the hospital for now and see how it goes. So I was released from the hospital and I went home, and honestly, I was not okay. I was not okay at all. At this point, I think I was home for about 3 days, but each day just started to get worse and worse and worse. And I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. I remember this was the first time that I really looked in the mirror and saw how bad I looked. And I remember crying, like an ugly cry, because I just couldn't believe what had happened to me and what was happening to me. So yeah, each night I noticed that it was getting harder to breathe. And by the third or fourth night, whatever the date was, I just couldn't take it anymore. We ended up going to my pediatrician, and she was like, okay, you know what? You need to go to the hospital now. I'm admitted back to the hospital, and this was one of the worst nights of my life. Now, I know in my previous videos, in my previous video, that I said, oh, this is the worst night of my life. This is the worst night of my life. This was the worst night of my life. But that is the reality of having a flare, especially a lupus flare. And honestly, it's probably the same with other illnesses. A lot of these nights are hard, and a lot of these nights are the worst nights of our life. These flare-ups consist of some of the most painful times of our life, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all aspects. So yeah, but this night was one of the hardest nights of my life because I almost lost my life that night. So I get to the hospital and my blood pressure is through the roof. So if you know anything about your blood pressure, so there's a systolic blood pressure, which measures the pressure in your arteries when your heart beats. And then there's a diastolic blood pressure, which measures the pressure in your arteries when your heart rests between beats, both above 100. Well, both of those numbers, it's two numbers, were above 100. That is really, really bad. So my blood pressure was so high. I was nauseous, and like I said, I couldn't really breathe. So honestly, I felt like I was suffocating. And I remember finally getting admitted to the hospital because I was in the ER. And when they saw how high my blood pressure was, they're like, oh no, we have to admit her immediately. And so they admitted me. I got to my room, and this is where they started to hook me up on oxygen, because when I would lay down flat, I literally couldn't breathe. And I just remember this moment vividly. When they came to give me the oxygen, I remember that I had about 2 nurses, a doctor, a nurse assistant there around me trying to help me. And then I also had my parents there and my grandma there with me. Like, I had all these people with me, but I felt so alone in that moment. No matter how many people were with me, no one was experiencing what I was experiencing. They would never be able to feel the pain that I was feeling in that moment. And at that point, I honestly felt hopeless, and I felt like this is above me. What's happening right now is above me. And it was just this loneliness that I can't even describe. But at that point, I surrendered. And I made peace with whatever was about to happen, because, like I said, this was the night where I almost died, and I knew I was on the verge of dying, and I made peace with everything before I surrendered and fell asleep. And luckily, they hooked me up to the oxygen, and I was able to live. But I remember waking up and being shocked that I woke up. I mean, I was so shocked that I woke up, and I was so happy that I woke up. And at that moment, I really got a lot of insight to what mattered. In that moment where I surrendered, I really thought about what actually mattered. And honestly, I feel like that has been one of the greatest advantages I have had in life. Although I went through so much and it was so painful, I also have an insight that could only come from experiencing the things that I did. That night that I almost lost my life, I wasn't thinking about this one girl who pissed me off in class. I wasn't thinking about that one guy who broke my heart. I wasn't thinking about those pairs of shoes that I wanted. I wasn't thinking about what color I wanted to dye my hair. You know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about the times that I didn't call my best friend. I was thinking about the times where I told my parents, oh, I'd rather stay home than go out and do the X, Y, and Z with you guys. I was thinking about the time that I didn't get to spend with my brother. I was thinking about how I wasn't going to go to prom with my friends or go to college, or, I wasn't even thinking about my grades. I wasn't thinking about all the things that used to occupy my mind. I was thinking about how I missed out on so many relationships and experiences with the people that I love. So that night really showed me what truly matters in life. And I'm just so glad that I am here today and that God gave me the opportunity to continue living. So I wake up and the doctors have no idea what is happening to me. So this is where I became the mystery girl. But one thing that I admired about all the doctors that I saw is that they were determined to find out what was wrong with me. So I had the pediatricians come first, and because I had Zika attached to my diagnosis, I swear they brought in like every resident in the hospital. And I remember that they were dressed and, they were wearing masks and they were dressed in those big white suits because at the time they didn't really know what Zika was. And of course they wanted to protect themselves. But I was like, whoa, like, am I infectious? Like, it was crazy. So the pediatricians came, and then that's when the infectious disease doctors came, the cardiologists came, the neurologists came. I mean, every group of doctors that were at that hospital, they came. And last but not least, the rheumatologists came. So Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Shirley, who are angels on this earth, were the last doctors who came to visit me, and they were the ones who figured out what was wrong with me. So I remember they said that they thought I had lupus. And I did not know what lupus was at the time. I knew that Selena Gomez had lupus, but I didn't know anything else about the illness other than that. At this point, I don't care. I just want to know what is wrong with me. And the next 3 days consisted of a lot of exams, a lot of blood cultures, a surgery, and a bunch of just different tests and visits from all kinds of doctors. It was really intense, and honestly, I don't remember much of it because it was too much. It was too much. It was sensory and brain overload at that point. And I was being wheeled out of the room at so many hours of the night and day. And like I said, I feel like I was famous because all these doctors saw me. All these doctors saw me. All these residents saw me. So I remember when they would take me to go get a test, or when they took me to my surgery where they were bringing me back, that people were stopping me. People were stopping me and they're like, Cristela, how are you? We're keeping up with your progress. We got you. We're going to figure out what's wrong with you and you're going to get better in no time. So I just want to highlight that these doctors were working really hard to figure out what was wrong with me. And I appreciate them and their professionalism and their empathy and their passion for medicine so much, because it is the reason why I am here today. I will forever be grateful for Texas Children's Hospital. So I had so many IVs done and blood cultures that at this point my veins weren't even working, and they would even have to use like these special x-rays in order to find a vein. It was very intense, and I just had to wait at that point. So this was about 3 to 4 days of tests and a surgery where they got biopsies of every organ that they could. And now it is February 18th of 2016. So it's February 18th of 2016, which was my 17th birthday. Yes, my birthday is February 18th. And yes, I was turning 17 that day. And I remember it was a beautiful day. And I remember waking up and my grandma arrived with these beautiful tulips. And they were closed actually. And yeah, it's my birthday. And at that point, I'm just waiting for the results of all these tests. And shortly after, Dr. Ramirez and Dr. Shirley come and they tell me that I have lupus. At the time, they diagnosed me with lupus nephritis stage 3. And after this day, I didn't cry for about 3 years. I did cry when I got that diagnosis because I remember her telling me that there was no cure, but that there was treatment and I would be able to live a normal life. But honestly, I had gone through so much that I just couldn't believe what I had gone through. I couldn't believe that in a matter of a few months, I had got sick the way that I did. And I was just so confused, but also relieved that I had an answer. But now I knew that I had to be strong because when she told me there was no cure, that's when I knew, okay, there's no cure, but I'm not going to let this illness take my life. And so I did cry and I was confused. But I told her, okay, it is what it is. Thank you so much for finding out what is wrong with me. What are the next steps? So she explained to me the next steps, and they were very optimistic and supportive. And I remember them specifically saying, we're glad we caught it where it is. And honestly, once you guys hear the details in my next episode about what was wrong with me on a scientific level, I cannot believe they said that because I was extremely, extremely ill. And to me, I wouldn't want to catch any illness in the condition I was in. So, yeah, that was pretty shocking. But, I mean, I'm here today. So, maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Or, in fact, it was a blessing in disguise. So, I remember that they were standing in front of those tulips that my grandma had got me for my birthday. So I didn't see them. But I remember after they finished talking about what the next steps were and what lupus was and assuring me that they were going to take care of me and I was going to be okay, they walked away and the tulips had blossomed. Like I said, they were closed when my grandma brought them to me and before the doctors came in, and when they left they had blossomed. It was so beautiful, and it honestly gave me the hope and the faith that I needed for the next few months of my life, which consisted of 6 months of treatment. Those 6 months honestly were the best times of my life and eventually led to me getting in remission for the first time. So that's where I'm going to end this episode today. Now, I know in the previous episode I said we were going to have a very special guest in part 2, but I really needed to tell this story before I get into the next part of my story where, yes, for sure, this time my special guest will be there to educate us about lupus and my diagnosis. So I want to thank God. I want to thank God because God saved my life. I've never told my story the way that I'm telling it now. But now that I'm telling my story and I'm looking at it from where I am now, it was divine timing. It was divine timing, and I am glad that I am here today. But most of all, I am honored that I can now tell my story and empower others who are going through the same thing, because I am a living testimony of a survivor, a lupus survivor, and lupus is a very, very, very serious illness. It has taken the lives of many, and if it hasn't taken their life physically, it has taken their life mentally and emotionally. It is not easy to go through an illness like lupus, and that is the reason why I am speaking about this and telling my story, because I want to empower others to know that you can live a healthy life and you can overcome lupus, because there is treatment for lupus. No, there is not a cure yet, but there is treatment that works and can put you into remission. So I also want to thank my amazing family and friends who were there for me during those moments and are still there for me to this day. Without you guys, I would not have been able to have overcome this at all. And last but not least, I want to thank Texas Children's Hospital for saving my life and just being amazing at what they do. I am so grateful to be here, and I am so grateful to be sharing my story. And I want to thank everyone who has tuned in and has taken the time to listen to my story and care about lupus, because it is a serious illness that affects so many people and it needs to be talked about. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of Empowered Psychology. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.